Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode from our podcast Land Talks, brought to you by the G20 Global Land Initiative. Today, we are happy to have Kemo Fatty with us. Kemo, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Would you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Well, my name is Kemo Fatty. I'm from the Gambia, a small country in West Africa, and I'm a conservationist by heart. And I'm also aspiring to becoming a politician to be able to effect policy change when it comes to land degradation. And I've been working on restoration efforts in the Gambia and also across the Sahel, notably, supporting the Great Green Wall Initiative of the African Union.
Oh, this is so inspiring. So, Kemo, as a youth activist who's passionate about environmental justice, what inspired you to start the Green Gambia Initiative, and how has it impacted conservation efforts in the Gambia so far?
So, in the Gambia, we have faced a serious problem of migration simply because of land degradation. Agriculture is one of the major economic activities, and most of the youths were getting frustrated around this particular venture. They claim that agriculture or farming is no more different from casino gambling, and €1 back then was equivalent to €1 was equivalent to $50. So most of the young people were migrating to Europe. In fact, in 2012, 8,000 Gambians had filed for asylum in Italy alone, not to mention Germany, Switzerland, and all of these other places. So we were having a massive brain drain. So I became a migration activist, talking to communities about young people, the need to stay. But I got challenged while I was doing this activism by the young people themselves, that if they can't get anything from farming and it's a 50-50 chance, why should they depend on it, considering the fact that the only factor of production they have is the soils and their labor, and the soils are degrading. So they had no choice but to migrate. They in fact claim that they are not migrants, but climate refugees. So this is where I started to check, in fact, how climate change was affecting my community as a whole. So this later on, from 16, I grew up to high school. Now in high school, after graduating, I got a job. And, in Africa, we had the insurance policies of our parents. So one day my mother called and she needed money for rice. As someone who has always been aspiring to become the Wolf of Wall Street. I don't care about most of these things. I just wanted to graduate, go to the US and go into the stock markets and do my thing. I didn't care about humanity and all that, My brothers should not die, but I want to go to the US. So when I went to give my mother this money to say, okay, here you can buy rice, I asked the question, we always used to farm rice in our rice fields here. Are you just trying to take my money from me? Or, you really need this? He's like, come, let me show you. So I walked with my mother into these rice fields, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Hypersalination has taken over. The place that used to be lush and verdant, believe me, it was covered in bare white patches and cracks. I was like, what's this? He said, it's salt. Since we have less and less rains, these float plains are not flushing enough. They are not giving us time enough for growing and maturation of our crops. So the only option, we have to abandon it. So this is why I call you for rice, Kemo. I wouldn't really take money from you. I know you want to go to Wall Street. So this is where I started thinking of how to solve climate problems. So I say, well, if at all it is the disappearance of the green and the fertility of the soil that is going, well, how about we make Gambia green? So the first initiative was actually to plant 10,000 trees to actually raise awareness about climate change. And these 10,000 trees, like when you go to Facebook, you want to write a project named Green-Up 10,000. That was the name of the project, Green-Up 10,000. So we didn't start as an organization. We started as a project. So when I want to write Green-Up 10,000 on Facebook, it didn't allow me. So I just wrote Green-Up Gambia. And then this gained traction. Tree planting became sexy across communities in Gambia. And then we became Green-Up Gambia. So we went further down from not just, planting of trees, but also engaging in policy. There were times that the government wanted to take over forest park, protected forest park, and the only organization that is planting trees, we say, well, if we are trying to plant trees, you cannot cut down trees that have already been grown, because trees take a long time. Trees are like babies. You have to nurture them, especially dryland trees. So we started kind of negotiating and talking to the government about protecting this, and this kind of yielded results. So they started listening to us. So we became as a liaison or acting as an accountability body towards protecting natural resources. So this grew impact. Instead of even planting more trees, we were able to save trees. Communities and youth started to get engaged. There was more awareness around climate change, and we were able to help farmers how to adapt to this, because our farmers are not really very much educated. They are traditional, smallholder farmers who have little or no education. So in their mind, in fact, they thought that it was the sins of the people and the world. That's why God has hold on to the blessing water, which is the rain. So when I went back there to let them know, no, this is not because of God. This is because of our own systems and the attitudes of human beings across the world. That's why the rain is reducing. If the green depletes, the rains will go. So what we can do to be able to avoid this is to actually put more green. So this is how we kind of build resilience from youth. It went to farmers, and people started understanding that we need to do something about climate. And this is how, we were able to kind of, raise the eco-consciousness of communities.
Kemo, this is so inspiring and very strong. Thank you for sharing this with us. Thank you, really. So, your work focuses on agroforestry as a tool for sustainability. How does integrating tree planting with sustainable livelihoods contribute to both environmental conservation and economic development in the Gambia?
Yeah, so in the Gambia, what has happened, we have a joke that said that, since we were colonized by the British, so after they left, we had the idea, they always told us to plant cash crops. So granite became the main principal commodity that gives the farmers cash. So the bigger your family, the more land you clear, the more granite you're able to have, and the more cash you have. So this mentality has stuck to farmers for a generation.
Of
so
course.
every time we are clearing virgin forests just to grow more trees, until the time that we have realized that granite in itself is no longer making any returns. So we started to talk about having to have trees on our ground, because we cut down most of the forest. Right now, only 40% of the Gambia is under forest cover. And even that 40%, 80% is degraded in some form. So we are having a significant crisis of soil. Topsoil is being washed off by wind and water action because of the treelessness. So we tell farmers that it's because of your agricultural system, your slash and burn. This is why you are getting poorer and poorer. So there is an agroforestry tree which has economic value that they can integrate while still growing granite and other vegetables, so that at the end of the 3 years, they will not have to depend on inputs to go. Because granite, you have to buy fertilizers, you have to buy pesticides.
Yes.
But with trees on your soil, it will help to keep your soil structure, fertility. And those trees, after 3 years, you will not even need to plant any more of those things. You can just sell the returns from, for example, the cashew or the moringa. So farmers started to plant these trees together alongside, making sure that we have a system of agroforestry that you can still grow things on the same piece of land, because they had the idea that when trees are on your land, crops don't do well. So we
Yeah.
had to change that mentality for them to be able to integrate these cashews. So now, if they harvest the crops, the perennial crops, the annual crops, now the perennial crops will take care of them. So seasonally, these crops are producing with limited labor and water. So the farmers now see the benefit. And through this, slowly the ecosystem begins to come back, because now we have the trees to hold on the soil, which is being washed off by wind and water action. So if we have trees, they now have both fruit crops and as well as, vegetables.
This
So
is
this
so
is how
smart.
we integrate agroforestry.
That's great. Okay. So, Kemo, as the head of community engagement at Civic, how do you ensure that communities are actively involved in conservation efforts? And what strategies have been most effective in raising awareness about climate change and environmental issues?
That's an excellent question. So we at Civic, we believe that change at the scale that the world needs can only happen if we connect the dots, share our assets, combine our strengths and build on model that work. So in terms of community engagement, we have realized always, whether it's ecosystem revitalization or project implementation, is always done from a top-bottom approach. So we came up with a citizens assembly model. So our 5 approaches is power, money, models, stories, and movement. So power, in a sense that we gather each community, one by one village after the other, to have a citizens' assembly. So these villages, they come together, put forward a map of their village, they bring in the critical people, the village leaders, which are sometimes called the alcalos. You have the traditional communicators. These are people that disseminate information, youth leaders, women, and ordinary citizens to sit together and discuss openly about how they can take, issues of their village. And from there, they will draft a report. And then we move on to the next village. So that's the power element. Now, the money element is that we don't have to go to communities to patronize them as if they cannot do it themselves. Every time, when projects come, you will have to establish a project management unit in there. There will be an expert from somewhere to come. So the farmers, they feel alienated. They are just there following, but they really do not understand what's going on because they are not involved from the very beginning. So we think that if this community fund is there, it will enhance democratization of funding flows. Instead of us planting trees, we allow the community structures to be able to execute this while we give them guidance based on the recommendations from the Citizens' Assembly that they have tasked the leaders of their village with this. And this way, we move down to the stories. Now, the stories are told by those people who are actually within the village to see, okay, how did this benefit you? How did it come? So that people can say their own stories. Similarly, in the African continent, people always tell our stories for us. We are never given the way to say, okay, this is how we want to do it. It's always some journalists coming to say this or that. So it's about the people themselves telling their own stories in the way they want. And movement, lastly, is to create that unbroken chain of human cooperation across all these communities. Because in one community, you can have a tree. That is, for example, I come from the North Bank. The rosewood is territorially extinct, and we have a seed bank. So we need to plant more rosewood, but we have to cooperate with the other community to be able to get the seeds from their community forest and bring it down there. So this cooperation is also happening across all these villages. So there is that unanimous way of, working together to restore one ecosystem while maintaining, our sovereignty and culture and our interactions amongst ourselves.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let me talk with you a bit about your vision for sustainable development. Your vision is an environmentally friendly and economically flourishing the Gambia. What do you see as the most critical steps needed to achieve this vision? And how can global initiatives like the G20 Global Land Initiative support this journey?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think if we look at it critically, the Gambia is divided into two by a river. This is one of our main key sources. Water is available in abundance, but we cannot harness the water. And essentially, all of our practices are traditional. We have not a single rainwater harvesting system in the Gambia. So at the end of the day, if we cannot take care of water, we cannot take care of our soil. So strategically, maybe international or multilateral corporations like the G20 can help us harness the powers of our water, building watersheds, water harvesting systems, and of course helping farmers to have water infrastructures on their farm. If we have water and fencing, the whole Gambia will be green in not less than 5 years. These are our only problems, because when we plant our trees, we have to then work on kind of protection because of animals and all of that. But if we have these protections, fencing and water, farmers are good to produce year round. So we have to wait 9 months only to farm for 3 months and wait again the other 9 months. So those farmers who have little infrastructure are the people who are always continuously producing. So imagine having a huge portion of smallholder farmers depending only on rain when they can grow their crops all year round. This transformation, if all of those people are able to continuously produce year round, this is already a huge economic development, because smallholder farmers are feeding the world. So at the end of the day, the Gambia is importing rice when we have float plains where we could grow rice for the entire Gambia. Obviously, this is going to help our balancing our imports over exports if only we are able to be food self-sufficient. So helping Gambia with water infrastructure and protection, protection even can come with policy, because sometimes at the district assemblies, they talk about having to have maybe bylaws that kind of distinguish between crop growers and livestock rearers so that conflict is avoided, because we always have these two farmers fighting. Either a cow comes into... So this is where we are lacking, and agriculture is accounting for a greater portion of our GDP. So I think if we are able to enhance this, it can really go a long way to prosperity for the Gambia. Not just, economically, but even in terms of people-to-people relationship.
Okay, great. My final question for you, Kemo, in a very short sentence. From your experience, from your own experience, what is one consistent truth about land restoration?
Okay, so land by far is the greatest carbon sink that we can have. We have 600 gigaton of carbon stored in a 50 centimeter layer of topsoil. So one thing that we can understand is that although we need to balance economic development as well as climate needs, but I personally feel that, more and more there is more dependence on the land. We're using our land faster than we are regenerating it. And this is the case across. And this has always manifested everywhere. Even if the government has an ambitious NDC, the thing is that anytime we have investors, they always kind of pinpoint to the very ecosystems we are going to protect. It's either our forest or our ocean resources. So this is always the case. And in the case of the Gambia, what I've seen throughout is that any development need that comes in, the forest has to pay the price for that development to happen. So this has caused us a serious problem. It is a sobering reflection that only in the Gambia, in relatively short period of our history, most of our larger wildlife species have disappeared. I was born hearing stories of lions, leopards, all kinds of antelopes. I've never seen them in the wild. Now it's even difficult to see rabbits. So my concern is, will my daughter even see squirrels or lizards in the Gambia, because the desert is creeping in. Yep. And more we're losing land faster than we are regenerating it. Even when you look at things like the Great Green Wall, the reason why we started a frontline movement is because of this consistency in land just getting degraded. We've seen that it's only 18% complete after a decade. It is because of this we say, well, let's start a frontline movement to say we want to increase this 18% to at least 70% by 2030. And the only way to do that is not by talking about it in the corridors of power, but actually involving those people whose hands are in the soil. So we are stopping this by saying, well, now the hoe will send messages to the pen about how we're going to restore our land. And this is our drive at the moment, to change that narrative.
Kemo Fatty, thank you for being with us today. It was really a true pleasure to have you with us. And for our audience, stay tuned for more and more episodes from our podcast, Land Talks. Thank you very much.